Squire coming to you guys again. This week we've got a couple of things to talk about, not too much. I've got a buddy of mine, for GPRIME, a longtime viewer, also another streamer, on with me tonight. We're going to be talking about a controversial Reddit, which I decided to post today. I'm not sure exactly why I decided to be so controversial today, and it just kind of blew up a little bit. In the 8 hours it's been up, which is pretty crazy for me. We've also got some patch notes to go over, but there's not too much to talk about, and we'll also be talking about a deck doctor. This week we'll actually be talking about some of the tournament that's going to be going on tomorrow, and so I felt like we would go over a tournament deck. However, if I have a viewer that can post me a deck, I will deck doctor it right now on the fly, or if you have just like a concept or something you want me to try to do, I will deck doctor it right here on the fly. So let's go ahead and jump right in and start off talking to GPRIME here. So yeah, just give me a synopsis of what you do, what kind of content you do, GPRIME, and then where you see yourself going in the future with Hex.
Okay, well, I don't exactly have a regular stream as such. I do stream as often as I can, but my work schedule makes it hard to do a normal, like, someone's got a 9-to-5 job can do like 8 o'clock to 9 o'clock every day and, you know, sort of be predictable. I'm a shift worker myself, so it doesn't work that way. I basically stream whenever I can, but, you know, it's really hard to predict when I'm going to be on if you don't know what my shift schedule is. So I actually do put that on my stream page, which is twitch.tv/GPRIMETV.
Right.
So people can kind of closer guess. But as far as what content I put up, I don't have a lot of experience with TCGs. I did start playing Magic when Duels of the Planeswalkers came out, and, you know, been increasingly more interested. So I started Hex obviously at the beginning, but I'm kind of entering it as an amateur trying to become a pro, and that's sort of my angle with my stream, trying to offer people the same kind of experience that I'm getting and try and help other people in my position become better players.
Right, and that's a good place to be at as well. And so, especially in the infancy of Hex, I think that players like you are going to be really good for the community moving forward. So you are helping out a lot, though, with the tournament, as I understand it, the HexTCGPro tournament, which will be going on tomorrow. The very first tournament, which is going to happen all in one day, and then the top 8 will happen on Sunday.
Yeah, and I mean it's a lot. That's a lot to try and squeeze into one day, and we didn't expect it to be nearly as popular as the first event, which had 187 entrants, as a lot of people know.
Right.
It's a lot harder for people to get time set aside to play a whole day of video games, especially when it could be another day as well if you do well enough to get into the top 8.
Right.
Right now, you know, the day before the tournament, we've got 98 entrants so far, so that's going to be almost 50 matches kicking off at exactly the same time. Tomorrow morning. That's going to be a stress for the servers. Oh yeah.
So hopefully the servers are going to be good tomorrow.
Right. That's kind of, well, in one way, we're sort of doing the Cryptozoic guys a favor by having such a focused stress test.
Right.
But hopefully it doesn't affect us too badly, and doesn't stress us too badly as judges, because there's going to be a lot of problems I expect.
Right. So another thing, this will kind of segue us into the patch notes, I think. We've already talked about, you know, some of the tournament things. We'll be talking about the tournament a little bit more as we talk about this, but they had a bunch of patch notes that came out, and it's just a bunch of card fixes, basically. I'm not going to go over each one of them here, but one of the big problems right now is that Zentos Inquisitor is not working properly. What's happening is when you play him, and then your opponent kills him, he goes back to your hands, his cost is sometimes staying the same, which is a big problem because he needs to not have that happen. So talk about that a little bit with the tournament tomorrow. How are you guys going to deal with that?
Well, from what I've observed, the way that the bug works is it actually gets bounced back to your card and gets the proper cost shown. But once you get to the sync step, or if you actually try and play it, it goes back to the original cost, and you're not charged the proper cost for that card. So that is definitely game breaking.
Right.
It's the kind of thing that if you're having a small event or a friendly match with a small group of people, then it's easy to say, okay, we're just going to pretend that costs 5, or we're going to pretend it costs 7 now.
Right.
When you have, like I said, 50 matches going on at the exact same time, it's going to be really hard to police that and to find out, like, okay, this guy played the card, he got bounced back, then he played another one worth 3. Someone says, oh, he replayed that card, but could he have played another version of Inquisitor? You know, who knows? It's just going to be impossible to police, so we just had to get rid of that card from the tournament.
Right, so that's really unfortunate because in the podcast that they had, the Procast, they predicted the top 3 decks, at least 3 out of the top 8 were going to have the Inquisitor in it. And actually, I looked to see if they were going to hot fix it today, and I don't know if it's been. I don't believe it's been hot fixed. I haven't tried playing the client, so having that banned out for this tournament is kind of a big deal.
Yeah, especially when it was one of the meta-defining cards. And with that card gone, it doesn't only toss out decks that would contain that card, but cards that heavily built themselves around dealing with that card are going to be a little bit hurt, or at least changed by that. So it puts a lot of pressure on people. They've got 1 day left to put their decks together, and hopefully it doesn't pose a big issue for a lot of guys.
Are you requiring players to register decks for this day?
Nope.
This tournament? Okay, so no registration, but there's no sideboards either. So
no sideboards. So people can switch
the
decks
game should go quick.
Between rounds, but not between games. So if obviously your opponent's playing Sapphire Diamond and you see them playing Blood Ruby afterwards, like in your second game out of 3, then let us know. That's not allowed.
Right. So another question about the tournament tomorrow. So they're going to be like 50-minute rounds, and so that's kind of a big deal because people aren't necessarily used to that. It's really keeping track of your clock is a big deal when it is that you want to become a competitive player, especially if you're playing control, because if your game isn't looking well, you need to move to game 2 sometimes. Or on the flip side, if I'm playing aggro and my control player has basically got me at about turn 6 or 7, they've basically taken control of the board state, it's to my advantage sometimes to move to those other games, because otherwise what's going to happen is we'll play game 1 and then game 2 could time out, for instance, and so then it's a 1 and then a draw, and then it's in their favor. So it's going to be really, really interesting to see, especially because a lot of games are going long, and which kind of makes me wonder if I should be making the choice I'm making for tomorrow, which I will be actually running control.
Yeah, and to be clear about that, the ruling that we are making with that is if someone has won game 1, you're playing game 2, and that's when the clock runs out, whoever won game 1 is taking the match.
Right.
So you have to definitely play quickly. Obviously, don't play hastily. Play smart, but don't waste any time because you don't have that much time to play.
Right. So do you have any judging experience at all with anything, any type of games at all? Or is this pretty much your first foray into that? Because John really spoke highly of you on the Procast, or the I guess the 2 Turns Ahead podcast.
Actually, I haven't listened to that yet, so I'm looking forward to it.
He really did. He really talked you up on there. It was really nice.
I actually don't. I mean, this is my first experience being in a judging role, but with the last tournament, I did kind of try and help out as much as I can on the forums, and answer questions when they popped up, and try and clear things up. And that's actually where John noticed that I'd be a big help with running the tournament, and that's why he asked me to do it.
Right.
So I'm basically just doing what I was doing before.
Yeah, I understand
but
that
in an official capacity.
He's got he does have a slot open for a tournament judge. He's really looking for HexTCGPro to be like a full-time tournament like director type person, which will probably fade away as the game starts doing a lot of that for us. But could come back if they have some sort of inter-guild tournament format going on.
I'm kind of hoping that Hex as a game kind of works with the community instead of trying to override it. Like you see, there was a lot of, like, if you paid attention to StarCraft competition, there was a lot of support that they gave to outside companies or outside parties trying to put together tournaments and events and stuff. There was, they kind of worked with the community.
Right.
And I'm sure that Cryptozoic doesn't underestimate the power of.
Well, they posted the tournament. They actually posted the tournament, I believe. Where is it? Maybe it's not here. I believe they posted. It's in the next one, I believe. Yeah, let's hold on. Let's go over. It is this one that says zombies, where it talks about the problem with the zombie servers. It talks about the HexTCGPro event. Video Armageddon is what's called.
And I think that's where we got a sudden surge of entrants, now up to 96, where it was like kind of like probably mid-80s.
On the main page.
Yeah.
So just talk about a couple things. We got the new cards. We got Chimes of the Zodiac here. Basically, it's 7 cost, casting cost. It's an artifact. When you play an action, copy it, and you may choose new targets for the copy. So it's very similar to what I've seen in Magic, where it was basically red and 1, and you could I forget what the card's called, but it was an enchantment you would put on the table, and it would copy all of your instants and sorceries in that game. So this is very similar to that. However, it costs 7. It's a little bit too prohibitive for me personally. It could be really used to good effect with maybe a lot of the escalation cards, because like if you play Crash of Beasts, you could get 9 Crash of Beasts off of 1 Crash of Beasts play, and people have pointed that out, that it's really good with the escalation cards, and I don't necessarily deny it there. Although it's interesting, because if you did do that play, it might only should do 1, because it depends on, I guess, how the stack works in this game. Because Crash of Beasts should be putting 2 effects on the stack, or actually it's casting it twice. Hold on, it's casting it twice.
I actually tested this out before coming on. I wanted to make sure that I knew exactly how the card worked before we talked about it.
Right.
And it actually does copy Escalation as a card.
Right.
So you're actually playing a new version of Escalation as a card. And when you play that card, it escalates all cards in all zones, and that includes the card you already played sitting on the stack. That's
wow.
Right.
Okay. So very interesting. Good thing that he's here to tell me that.
So yeah, it's pretty huge. And I actually had the same initial impression as you, that this card seems a little bit too high costed for what it does for you.
Right.
But then I started working it together with, Escalation, Chronic Madness, for example. It works pretty well with Infernal Professor, because you use a copy of Infernal Professor, it gets doubled, and then if you grab any actions off of your deck, so you grab 2 burns off your deck, that's 8 damage right off the bat for 2 costs for that Professor.
Well, plus, the burn's free, basically. As long as you have the threshold.
Yeah, so I tested it against a wild deck I was playing against, and I ended up getting Chronic Madness twice, and I was pulling like wild auras and wild growths all over the place, and just throwing them on this one Inquisitor, crushing through, and 1 hit killed with that Inquisitor. It's, it has the potential to get insane. Sure,
but you have to of course, you have to actually cast it, not have it countered, and there's other things in the way. But you are right. When we talked about it before the cast, it is an artifact, and there's not a lot of hate out there, and typically, especially in the games that we're seeing, artifact hate is going to sit in your sideboard or your reserves in this game, and that's when it's going to come out. It's going to come out of those, and you're not going to see a lot of main decked artifact hate. It's not like in some other meta games right now. So that the meta is, it could be a little bit of a paradigm shift where people might maybe one of an artifact hate for something like this if they're really afraid. Basically, something that destroys permanents would probably do pretty well, because it has at least a dual use. Yeah,
kind of like Nature Reigns, where it's both constants and artifacts.
Right, like Nature Reigns would be very good. So moving on to the Inferno. Now they changed this. This used to be, I believe it used to be deal damage to each player, and it escalated, I believe, if I remember right. It was like on your turn it would deal 1 damage to you, on my turn it would deal 1 damage to me, and then get like a counter. And every time it was dealing damage, it counted how many counters. Completely different now. It's more random, which is...
I'm looking at the version actually on HexTCG Gamepedia. Yeah. And it was 4 cost 3 threshold at the start of each champion's turn, does 3 damage flat.
Oh, just straight up 3 damage. Okay.
Yeah.
So that was back in Gen Con time period. Now they've made it more random. They said basically it's 3 cost, 2 what is that? Ruby threshold. This constant interplays with an Inferno counter. So 1 counter at the start of each champion's turn. Choose 1 at random. Add an Inferno counter to this constant, or deal 1 damage to the champion for each Inferno counter on the constant. So it's basically a coin flip of whether you're taking damage or not, and it gets bigger and bigger whenever it doesn't deal damage. And
the whole coin flip metaphor is actually really important when you think about this card.
Right.
Because if you're thinking about coin flips, you have a 25% chance of it backfiring completely. Is that something you want to bet on?
I personally really don't like it at all. I mean, I don't think it's going to come through to you. I mean, it's going to be a fun card. It's going to be a fun card in non-competitive games if they have something like some sort of Highlander or was it Commander format or something like that. I think it's going to be a fun one to have out because it's going to go around the circle and it's going to happen each time, and then it's going to be all giggles.
And it could be more, in multiplayer it could be better.
Right, it's going to be a lot more fun in that format. But as far as competitive play, I really would not chance this card at all.
And I feel like it could have some use someday if there's ever an effect in Hex that's like, when a champion is dealt damage this turn, this effect is better. Kind of like Morbid, sort of, or like Bloodlust from Magic, but a little bit different. I mean, at least then you've got a somewhat a 50% chance for those cards to be able to power up. There's definitely better cards for that effect, though.
So I have 2 people in my channel right now. You guys are welcome to ask us questions or talk to us. We are looking for a deck to doctor tonight. Irish, I looked at your decks, and unfortunately, because they're so similar to the deck I've seen on John's cast earlier in the week, I've decided not to do it. It was some dwarf decks, I believe, and he's did a really good job with those. So I don't want to take any. Right now I'm looking at doing the draw go deck and basically paring it down, the one I've been playing lately, which is a Sapphire Blood deck at the end of the cast. So we're just talking about some of the cards right now that we're going through. We've got Zombie Plague here. This one I like, and I talked to different. I had a decent Twitter chat about this today, actually. In between doing stuff at work. So it was about 7 or 8, I'd say, volleys back and forth, of little tweets back and forth. And I said, what do you think about this card? How you feel like it's going to affect the metagame? Because I really feel like this is going to be a card that's going to affect Inquisitor a lot, and a lot of other decks. Because
and the funny thing about it is
a pretty good chance of invalidating a couple of Inquisitors in opponent's deck.
And the funny thing about that is they finally have an answer to Inquisitor, and it's a blood card.
Right, of course. And then someone did point that out, and I do believe that is probably one of the major problems there, because now you're answering blood with blood, and that's a very good argument. John said he didn't like it, particularly because it's random. He feels like he's going to whiff with it too much. I played with it, and it's like every turn. And when you whiff with it, I really don't feel too bad, because I get to see cards from my opponent's deck. My opponent also gets to see the cards, so they do know what's going on, which is interesting to me.
And even if you're not mainboarding it, I feel like pretty much any blood-based control deck should at least side it for like a Shinhair deck, because
but Shinhair's really not dangerous to you.
Or
until Shinhair is dangerous, then maybe. But it does a lot of interesting things. I was thinking about today.
Because it kills Honeycap outright, because Honeycap is 0
it kills Honeycap outright.
Yeah.
It takes care of Honeycap. It takes care of those resource dorks, but that actually helps your wild opponent because they don't want to draw those late in the game. You learn what they're playing, Irish Batusi. That's exactly it. You kind of know what to expect. It also nerfs troops down. So those troops that are a lot bigger, suddenly, like, they come out as 1/1s. You have like a 1/1, what do you call it, a Buccaneer or something coming out. Another thing that this really affects is those tempo decks, because a lot of the stuff in the tempo deck is 1 toughness, which means you're going to get zombies and kill all those Thunderbirds and a lot of the other stuff that's out there. So this is going to make it more lucrative, I think, for people to play at least a 2 toughness troop in your deck, and those 1 toughness troops may become a little bit more risky. But overall, I mean, we'll see how much people are playing it. I'm personally going to be playing probably a 1 of or a 2 of this card in my control deck, as I feel like it's pretty good. It also gives me bodies to block with from a control standpoint.
Yeah, it's a card that plays kind of a similar role to Extinction, but it gives you other options of what to do exactly with that sort of control, and you can like preemptively destroy your opponent's army instead of waiting for it to come out.
Right.
So it works a little bit better if you're playing troops of your own, because you don't have to use that board wipe to disable your opponent.
Probably the worst deck for this to be against, this card to be against, is some sort of mono Ruby deck. I mean, you're still going to get your troops out, but most of the time Ruby's going to play the cards it has in hand and draw like maybe 4 more and play those, and the game should hopefully be over for them. For them to have won, and if it isn't, then you basically win. Anyways, so.
But you'll have to be able to prepare to sideboard this out if you're against like a creatureless control deck, for example. Same as any murders or Extinction.
Right, I had someone play 4 of these against my control deck, and it runs 6 troops in it, and he killed like
Yeah.
3 of them, and the rest of the game he had 3 dead zombie plagues on his board, but he could see my deck, so I mean it wasn't completely useless. New card frames, everyone's excited about this. I was somewhat confused last week about this. So the double back button is right here. The card modifications is right here, which I believe is like your armor and stuff like that. Everything else is pretty much in the same place. We also have a faction right here. But the card borders look really slick. I'm really digging the card borders. Everybody pretty much is. Anything to add?
I do find that they stand out a little bit against the current UI because it is sort of a little bit muted and bland when compared to the really sharp, really catchy cards that have been just released.
Right.
The older UI sort of fits the more paper-looking cards that we used to have before, but these are very much more electronic.
Right.
And the UI I feel like needs to be a little bit tweaked to sort of match that sort of visual
I believe
aesthetic.
Corey's said all along that this is like, he always says this is alpha, and so like he's always talking like this stuff is it's going to change. So I believe that the UI is going to get an overhaul as well. I mean, it already looks light years beyond the MTGO one and even
That's
the
true.
MTGO remake.
Yeah.
But it's going to
still not out of beta, isn't it?
But it's still going to get better, So that's pretty crazy to think about. I think the modification will include the full art and foil. Yeah, it's possible that the modifications might include that. I remember watching the video, and there was a button on the right side that they were pressing, and the full art came down. But you could be right. I mean, we'll see. There's a lot of things that could be happening in the future.
Yeah. If they do make any changes to this new appearance, I feel like they should make the gem slot a little bit more visible, especially when you're in like the full deck or full card view and sealed events. You can't actually quickly at a glance take a look at what cards have gem slots in them.
Right.
Like you can search obviously to filter out, but it's not as easy as it used to be to pick out the cards in your deck or in your pool.
Yeah, if you need a specific gem in a deck, and you have a little bit of play with what you want.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, okay, so apparently the UI is the final UI. Okay, this is what Batusi is telling me. So one final thing with the patch notes, they talked about basically the zombie thing. I'll just touch on it real quick. What was happening was, if you were in a match in like a tournament, and then your tournament crashed, but you sat in the tournament, you didn't leave, and then they restarted the tournament server, you would no longer be able to start games with other players. But the interesting thing about this was you would whenever you tried to start a game with another player, that would infect them, so they would have the same problem because you would try to start the same game, and that would just like spread this infection. So this kind of reminded me of like EQ2, when there was an infection that spread through that game, which was programmed, and then there was another one in World of Warcraft where they pulled something from a dungeon, and they basically infected all of the main cities, and it was very kind of sounded like that to me. Just kind of something that's interesting. Anything to add there?
I mean, aside from the fact that I was definitely affected by that bug, no. But I mean, it does seem like sealed events are slightly more stable than they used to be, but there's still the problem where if people leave, things kind of don't end properly.
Right.
And we need a little bit more feedback, I think,
eventually, like when it goes to open beta. So we'll still be on not the greatest hardware in closed beta, I believe, and then in open beta we'll be going to much better hardware. So moving on, so here we go. We're going to go on to the controversial part of tonight right now. So what I did today was I posted this discussion topic on a Reddit forum. And I'm not going to read through it for you guys. I'll just give you a quick synopsis. Basically, and I know it's a big white screen, so I went ahead and clicked back for you guys so you could not have to deal with all that bright whiteness. But basically what I'm talking about in there is how it is that it's acceptable in our culture to have people that are like, yeah, I basically hacked the game, or I have this aimbot and that's cool, or whatever. And I feel like that's something that should be discouraged. it should be something, bottom line, like if you're someone that's exploiting games and stuff, I think that we have a responsibility to say at least to our friends, hey man, that's not cool. Now, obviously, the bulk of exploits sit at the level of the company that is hosting the game. So in this case, Cryptozoic. It's their job to stomp out all the exploits and make sure it is that people aren't exploiting and we're not getting having a lot of problems in the future, because then we have things like gold farmers, and you have people that are whispering you and trying to sell you gold, or there's just a big giant slew of problems. And this is also just gamer culture in general, like where it is that people say, it became acceptable for people to buy gold for World of Warcraft, and that was just fueling the fire. So people say, oh, this is a business now, so I can go ahead and do this, even though it's against the EULA and illegal, and I'm basically hurting a lot of other people. I mean, it's one thing for me to get a Game Genie out and mess around with my Nintendo and play the game. I know I'm not owning the game, okay? I know that I've got infinite lives and I'm just messing around. That's quite another to affect an economy or a bunch of other players on the game by basically trashing everything. Had a little bit of backlash. This is a very controversial subject, so if you guys are seeing this on YouTube, I would really appreciate some comments below on how you feel about this. I'll also post a link to the Reddit discussion on there. Yeah, do you have any thoughts on this?
Yeah, well, right now the Hex community is pretty small, and I feel like the way it is, everyone knows everybody, and it would sort of self-govern itself as far as at least being in the public. People would not be like, oh, hey, I've got this thing where I could get 1,000,000 gold and I'm going to trade it for platinum and get all these cards and stuff. Like, people would not, knowing that there's a real money economy tied to Hex in some way, people aren't going to tolerate that. Hopefully when the community gets bigger, it's still able to kind of self-govern itself.
Right.
Yeah. But I agree with you in the fact that I'm not going to have any tolerance for that with regards to my own content, and I respect that you're not going to with your own.
Right.
And
yeah. So yeah, basically what I said at the bottom of the thing, I kind of took some steps. I kind of got a little bit bold on there, and I said basically, no one is coming to my birthday party if they're an exploiter. That's what I said, and by birthday party I mean my show. Yep. But seriously though, I mean, if I found out that someone was an exploiter and they had been a previous guest, I would pull the show off of my YouTube. And the reason why is because I just wouldn't want to be associated with that person. And that actually hurts me more than it hurts them, because I put work into the show, I spend time, and I actually do spend my own personal time getting this stuff ready. And so for me to have to take that step, it really does hurt me more than it hurts them.
Yeah, and there was one comment on the Reddit there where someone said that you aren't doing anything by doing that, like you aren't changing anybody, and I don't think that's necessarily true. You're not going to erase it by any means, but you can definitely discourage it, and making it publicly discouraged, that attitude changes people's opinions. You'd be surprised like how much peer pressure is a big thing in online social communities like this, and I think it's a positive thing to tell people, no, that's not cool.
Right. And I mean, that's all I'm really asking. I'm not mad. I feel really bad whenever I hear about things, but I've been a party to it as well. I've been a party to someone that's the get along, go along guy when I go to work, and someone's like, hey, I'm playing World of Warcraft right now, because they're basically, leveling up their character and exploiting the game. And I'm just like, yeah, that's funny. And, I should have just said, that's kind of not cool, man. But that's all I expect people to do. I don't expect people to be like excommunicate people and just like, I don't know, do something extreme. I don't expect people to do that. I just expect people to just. It should be one of those things where if you are an exploiter, you should be wanting to hide it. You shouldn't be putting it out into the open and it be socially acceptable. That should not
you shouldn't be doing it at all,
acceptable.
But I mean,
you shouldn't do it at all. Exploiter. Okay, so I really believe that people that are going to cheat are going to cheat, but I just want to keep the honest people honest, and that's the main thing. Because if honest people see other people doing it, then they're going to do it. So this all stemmed back, just so everyone knows, from a League of Legends thing where the person was basically talking about an aim bot that someone was using, where basically you hold down a key and it gives you perfect CS, and it gives you you can dodge skill shots perfectly. You can do a lot of other crazy stuff with it, apparently. And that's going to hurt that community, and that's unfortunate. And as games get bigger, more and more people are going to target them. There's a reason why it is that people target Windows, and it's because it's the platform of choice for everyone. But we're starting to see some other things in the cyber world, you know, on a kind of like a quick bunny trail, where it is that exploiters are starting to go after phones now, and they're starting to go after like your iOS devices. They're not going after the Windows phone because market share. If you are someone that's going to attack someone, you are going to go for the largest community and the most stuff that you can get out of it, like as far as monetarily, for the most part. There are other motivations, of course, as well, but that is like a big deal. So right now we're small, and we shouldn't see very much, but as this game grows, I really think that's important as a community, that we just basically have no tolerance for this stuff. And
Yep.
you know,
And one thing that everyone needs to keep in mind as players, when you have cards in this game, and when there's an economy and a value tied to all these cards, all this hacking and stuff affects you directly. Like, you can't just ignore it.
Right. Exactly. So, enough of the ugly stuff. Let's move on to the deck doctor. I know that's why everyone's really here to so we're going to build this deck. It's going to be exciting. So we are going to go ahead and I believe I need to start a new deck. So we're going to create a new deck, and we will call this the BS control. I actually like the way that comes out, the BS, because I want my opponent on the other side to just be like, man, this is BS.
This is... Yeah.
That's what I really want them to be thinking, like, the whole time. So I'm going to go ahead and make the cards a lot bigger, and we'll zoom in on the thing, and people will be able to see, and that will be nice. And so we are in Sapphire and Blood, so we're going to go with Alpha. And again, I just can't say enough about the guys that do this TCG browser and deck builder. I love it. You guys keep up the good work. I love it. I would not have this. This show would be a lot harder to do if you guys did not have this available to me. And I just really
it's amazing how up to date they managed to keep this tool. Like there was a few other places where you could see the cards, like the wiki, and there was like a Gamepedia page. But they actually have this like up to date. Looks Chimes of the Zodiac, recent patch, already up days later.
So the dwarf deck that John Tata made, if you go to the HexTCGPro website, you can find it there. It's the last podcast number 3 of 2 turns ahead. So make sure to check that out. It's got some interesting stuff. He's using Droz Walker. He's using a lot of very interesting stuff. Apparently you can get it out on turn 3. There's a possibility you can Droz Walker your opponent on turn 3. So that's pretty exciting. So it's an exciting, interesting looking deck. I believe it's mono Sapphire and dwarves. So the big thing we're talking about when we're talking about draw go is this goes back to a lot of early Magic, and what it is basically I'm going to sit back and I'm going to just basically draw cards and respond to anything my opponent does, and eventually I'll draw more cards than my opponent because I have some card drawing in there as well. And as long as I can shut down every card that they play and then just play my one threat, I can win the game. So that's basically the premise.
It's like the Zerg of Hex, the reactionary play
right.
style.
It's basically I'm going to deny anything that's a huge problem for me. So this is obviously going to be 4 Countermagic and a bunch of removal. Mesmerize is kind of falling out of my graces right now with some of the other things going on, but I have been running 1 in this deck. Moving on down. I'm not running Sorrow. I'm not running Demolisher. This is a low troop deck because I really don't want my own stuff to be affected by troops. Troops really need to do something in this deck. I am not running Bottle in here, although you could run Bottle instead of what the choice that I made. I'm actually running the new, what's it called? Oh, I forget what it's called. The new... what's it called? The one that does your resource fixing.
Oh, the I would have been able to say it if you weren't asking what's it called, but now I'm blank too.
Yeah. Okay.
It's the one that looks like a typewriter.
Right. Yeah. Basically, it's one. It's an artifact. You put into play your resource fix. Polymorphic
Yeah.
Dingler's making a comeback for me, so this is at least a one of. You might two of. I've tried two ofing it in this deck. Our champion is going to be the one that draws us cards.
Adaptable infusion device. That's what you're looking at.
There we go. Adaptable infusion device. So I had 4 originally. I've taken it down to 3. And I was thinking about trying to get Inquisitor into this deck, and then I found out he's banned, so I didn't have to worry about that as much. So what else have we got here? Just moving through everything. Yeah, so there's that Inquisitor. Unfortunately, he is banned for the tournament tomorrow. This is going to be the deck I'll be playing tomorrow. If everyone knows, I'm a big fan of Peak in this deck because it allows me to find those one-ofs I need to answer my opponent. Let's see. I don't have a Chaos Key in here, but it wouldn't be wrong necessarily to run one. I have a single Argus in here. I was running 2. I had to pull it down to 1. Zombie Plague, I'm running 2 of these right now. I'm considering going down to 1. I pulled Urnaz from this deck, and the reason why is because he is nice, because I can put him into play, but it felt like he was getting answered too much, and then when that happened, it was kind of very, like, awkward. It wasn't a lot of play going on there, so I've pulled him from the deck recently. I'm running
It's
classic,
a very expensive card to get murdered.
Yeah, or anything else, really. Anything that just basically takes him out of the game. It's just... and then I do get one of my opponent's troops, but a lot of times it hasn't really been the greatest. So big one for this deck is Relentless Corruption for me. This has 1 games. This has the dual ability to make my opponent draw out. Now, I know what you're thinking. The clunkiness of running Relentless Corruption along with Zombie Plague, because I could Relentless Corruption and draw one of those debuffed troops that my opponent draws, and has in their deck, and that's a very strong possibility. But they kind of also work in tandem with each other, because Relentless Corruption is going to, along with Zombie Plague, is going to put less cards in my opponent's deck, and eventually they'll draw out before I will. So that's a secondary win condition for me. Along with that, Relentless Corruption is going to kill off a lot of those like 1 toughness troops, and so I won't be drawing as much like low end stuff with Relentless Corruption.
And I know you don't like that Chime, but if you think about Chime with Relentless Corruption, that's 1 play, 3 cards right there, and every version that you copy becomes a card and goes back in your deck. So you play Relentless Corruption, 2 copies of Relentless Corruption get shuffled back into your deck.
That actually does make it a little bit more lucrative for me. So Murder, I'm running, I believe I have 2 of these right now. Which you could go up. I'm not playing Life Siphon, although it would help me hold on. It doesn't control the board state whatsoever for me. So that's a big problem. I'm playing the obligatory 4 Extinction. I am playing 2 Corpse Flies in here because these have the ability to make my opponent discard a card, and they also block for me. I think I have 1 Corrupt Harvester. I managed to keep one of those in. It's going to gain me life and restabilize me. I'm not running Atrophy. I could, but I feel like you know, if Inquisitor was in, I could deal with it fairly well with the deck. I'm just going to put 10 of each shard right now. I'm missing some cards already, I can tell. I'm going to have to go find, because I've already gotten down to the bottom of the list. So let's see, I have to go up here. I also have two flocks. I should have something like maybe 40 or 50 cards right now. I think I'm running 25 resources total, so yeah, I've got 52, so I'm pretty close to having all the cards in the deck. I just have to look through to figure out what I'm missing. Let's actually pump these up. So actually, you know, I'm missing Shards of Fate. Shards of Fate. Also need to get my champion in here. Where is he? There he is, Waytt the Sapper. So draw me cards. Now, it wouldn't be wrong necessarily. They talked about in the Procast, you could also run Venom Scorn, but again, we don't have to worry about what's it called anymore. We don't have to worry about Inquisitor. Now, it looks like they might have changed them, because he used to give -1 to the back end, so that was actually removal, and now he's -1 to the front end, which makes him horrible. That's pretty bad.
Is that not an old version of Zerd? Because I'm pretty sure that he still is
does that.
-1,
Okay,
-1.
so hopefully that's what he does. Because if this is how it is, this is not good at all. But this would be an option.
Yeah.
As long as this gives the minus. Okay, so it looks like the change down here says -1, -1 for 4 charges instead of 3, and that's pretty good because it's removal. Nice, one more removal card for that Inquisitor. But unfortunately, no one is playing because we can't play him because he's broken.
Speaking of champions, I'm wondering if when sideboarding comes into the game proper, if you're going to be able to sideboard champions, because I know in limited you currently can't. You can't even change gems during the sideboarding.
I don't think so. I don't see that being a thing because this should be you're basically like your hero, and I don't see you changing streams with that, especially mostly thematically, but also just for balance purposes.
Yeah, and I don't think we've had to officially deal with that with the tournament yet, but that might be something we have to come into. Especially with Zerd being popular to deal with troops that have a low back end, and some maybe decide they don't need that in a certain matchup.
Right. I don't see it happening, though, tomorrow. I think most people are pretty honest. So I'm down
there's no sideboarding tomorrow.
Cards.
So no worries.
Right, there's no sideboards, but they could like load up a different deck. Like that's the same deck, but it changed the champion, so you know, I don't know why someone would do that, but I'm trying to remember. Oh, I need the that's what it is. The 3 cards I'm missing are the card I was just talking about, which is that rack thingy. The rack thingy. PvP. It's you know what? I have shards. That's why it's not pulling it up. Where are you? Where are you? They might have an old version on here of that card as well. So mostly what we're going to be doing, what we're going to be working on with this deck tonight is looking at our curve and making sure that we're good. I've actually thought about, as I've been away from the game, going down to 24 resources. So that's a strong possibility. You know, I'm going to throw this Chimes on there just because GPRIME is hanging out with me and I think he's cool.
You know, I've noticed. I've watched the last few episodes of deck building with the Squire, and I've noticed that you go lower resources than I usually would. It seems like it's kind of a risky move to be playing 24 resources, 23 resources in some decks. Can you talk about what makes you make that decision?
It's really hard. I actually don't do the math. It's a lot of like experience, I'd say, and it's a lot of going to my Magic roots, and so like I really don't want to flood sometimes. In a deck like this, you really want to drop resources every turn, and if you miss a resource drop, it's a big problem. So you kind of need that 25 resources, but it depends on my curve. Like we can see right now, I actually have 3 1-drops in here. Actually, I should have more, I thought. I had more 1-drops than that. Apparently, I only have 3. So, looking at the curve on here, most of what I need to get to is in this 3-point range. And I'm an old Kithkin player. That's like when I got serious about Magic. And it was 23 resources, and you had like a couple of 5-drops and some 4-drops, and then the most of your deck was in the 1, 2, 3 range, and the deck ran perfectly, really well like that. And so like usually when I'm in an aggro type of a deck, I will focus more down towards the 23 resources and make sure that I have like a couple of 5-drops, a couple of 4-drops, and then 3s, 2s, and 1s, and it depends on how aggressive I want to be. But like a deck like this, it depends. Like I've pulled Uranus out of the deck, but again now I've got Chimes, so that's like if I keep Chimes, I kind of have to stay at 25. If I get rid of Chimes, then I feel like I have enough where I could probably go down to 24 and instead play the cards which I can't find for some reason. Maybe it's in PvE, or maybe it just didn't get added. I just forgot what it's called too. No, again, I forgot what it's called again.
What you looking for?
I'm looking for that the new. Basically, you play it for 1, and it resource fixes you.
Adaptable Infusion device.
Yeah, Adaptable Infusion. It might not be on here, but we're going to imagine that it's there, I think, is what we might have
It
to
should
do.
be if Chimes is there.
Oh, there it is. Okay, so good. So John dislikes this card. And I understand where he's coming from. I really do, because a lot of times it's not going to do very much for you other than resource fix you. But it does draw me cards, and I can do it during my opponent's end step. And it's done pretty well for me so far.
Well, really, what it does is it acts as extra Shards of Fate if 4 Shards of Fate in your deck isn't enough.
Right.
And it does have the drawback of not providing you with the resource, but it's still, you can use it to draw a card once you get to 4, so it's not useless once you played it.
So the big thing I look at when I was looking at playing that Adaptable Infusion device in this deck or not was the amount of double thresholds I have in this deck. I mean, let's just look at it. We've got the 2 Flocks, a Dingler, the 4 counterspell, so that's like another, so that's 7. Oracle Song, we're not going to count that. Peak's fine. Zombie Plague is another one. It's double on the other side. You know what? I didn't even. Okay, so Zombie Plague's another one, so that's 2 more. So where we were at, like 7, that's 8, 9. Another 4, that's 9, so that's 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. 20 different cards are double threshold in this deck. That's a lot of cards. For me only to have, 4 double threshold cards, and so the clunkiness factor of this deck is you really can't deny it.
Yeah, and you have to especially look at the low cost cards that are 2 threshold, because, like, for example, Thunderbird, your Inquisition, cards like that, if you want to be able to play them the turn they come out, it's going to be really hard. Zombie Plague is another example.
Probably the most really important card I have to play is Extinction. And so if I do not land 2 Blood Shards, but I have Extinction in hand, I can lose games. So that's really huge.
When it comes to 7 cost cards, that 2 threshold doesn't matter so much, but early on it definitely does.
Right, exactly. And we've talked about that before, because by that time you should have drawn enough cards. Although I did have one game where I had like 1 Blood and then like 5 Sapphire for some reason.
Everybody has that one game.
Right, and that happens. I don't know if I can risk.
And then they have that one game and they post on the forum saying the shuffler is broken.
Right, of course. Yeah, we've talked about that. So I think I can go down 24 resources. I don't know. I don't think I can do it and play Chimes, though, necessarily. I'm really worried about playing Chimes in here. And so here's the other thing about this deck. So I have Argus in here, and he costs 12. But he doesn't really cost 12, because I'm going to sit on the board state for quite a while before I play him. He could cost nothing if I sit long enough. A lot of times if I'm playing Argus, I want to have Countermagic open. The other biggest problem with playing any type of control deck like this right now is that I can't counter a Countermagic. That's the biggest problem, because if I do so, it will lock up the game, and most people know this by now. I actually did that in a tournament game, and because of that, it's one of the reasons why I lost the round I was on. So it's one of those things. I do feel like I can go down, but I can't do it if I get rid of that. But I think I do want to get rid of it. I don't know. I don't think Chimes is enough for me.
Well, one thing you have to look at when you're playing Chimes is that you're playing a lot of actions, because it doesn't work for troops. Say you got Giant Corpse Fly and you're playing Chimes, maybe you might want to consider taking the Corpse Flies out and playing Inquisition instead, just because you can play it twice if you get Chimes.
That's true, but I feel like I need to have this body for those mono Sapphire decks. When I ran this deck before, I actually ran less Oracle Song and 4 Flock. And Flock can be good in a lot of situations, but it can also be not consequential as well. Having the 4 Oracle Song was really nice too, because that helps me get to my big money maker, which is Relentless Corruption. Like I said, Relentless Corruption is going to allow me to stabilize board states. It has a win con because I can make my opponent draw out. It does a lot of things. It is card drawing because I'm drawing out of my opponent's deck. It's not so great the first time I play it. The second time it's just as good as an Oracle Song, and then every time after that it's ridiculous, because eventually I'm just drawing ridiculous cards with it.
Yeah, like I was playing a game with Relentless Corruption and Chime where I almost milled them out with Relentless Corruption. Like, I was playing it so often, my hand was full, I was discarding cards every turn and just playing whatever I wanted to, just destroying.
Now, I guess that Chime is nice, though, in the fact that I could Mesmerize 2 troops, I could Dingler 2 troops.
Yep.
I couldn't counter 2 spells with it. That's kind of clunky. So, do you know if, when you're using a spell, if you can not say to copy it? Because that would break the game. That would definitely be something, reason why I wouldn't play it.
I actually did test it with Countermagic, and you can just choose to target the same spell, and once that spell's gone from the stack, it fizzes. So for Countermagic,
so
it's
break
fine.
The game. So that's really.
So somebody was saying that Chime does break when you counter the spell that Chime doubled, because that is no longer on the stack, and Chime tries to copy Chime instead.
Yeah, see,
and then you can just copy it.
Yeah, I don't think I can play it, because if my opponent tries to counter and they don't know that, like, that's a new thing. So that's another thing for tournament play where I feel like I really don't want to play it. It would be nice to have double peak, though, because that would just run me through the deck. I don't know. I just feel like that by the time I play this card, I really would probably rather draw Relentless Corruption or probably Removal or something. It's another deck. This is another card where I would end up just running it out there, and it doesn't affect board states. It's a buff for the rest of my stuff. If I was going to run something in this deck, I would probably run Archmage over this to draw me more cards. In fact, I might just choose to do a 1 of Archmage in here. I don't know.
Well, you still have time to test them both out before the tournament starts tomorrow.
That's very true. That's very true. But I do feel like okay. So right now, looking at the curve, I feel like I can go down 1 to 24. Do a lot of the card draw, and I'll probably just pump up my Infusion device, maybe, or more removal. I would like to have 2 Dinglers. I feel like Dingler is just one of these things that's kind of a big deal. And I need to get more Sapphire in this deck if I remember right, so we're going to do that. And it actually broke out pretty well if I remember right. So we're going to go through and count out all the icons like I like to do to get a ratio, and then I use that ratio to tell me how I want to put resources in the deck. And like I've said before, like, this is just a guideline. You want to always play your decks for a little while to get a good feel for. Sometimes, like, the ratio can say one thing, but maybe you really need to drop this turn 2 Zombie Plague in this deck for some reason. And so because of that, you're going to go up 1 or 2 on those blood resources to make that a thing. I'm going to go ahead and shut off my sound and let GPRIME talk a little bit as my son is crying.
Okay. Well, I'm a couple seconds behind your stream here, so what you're actually pointing at is not what I'm seeing right now. But I do want to kind of talk about what you're talking about with the Threshold and the low cost. If you're playing Inquisition, that's one card that's really important. If you're playing Thunderbird, that's really important. So do make sure that you can handle those cards. You can use a tool that I like to use called a Hypergeometric Calculator to actually calculate your chances of having a certain card at a certain turn. It's fairly intuitive to use, but I can actually open it up here so I can kind of explain each of the fields.
If you have a link, if you have a link, I can go to it.
Yeah, sure. I'll post that in the chat. I always use this tool when I'm building decks because it's really cool to be able to figure out the odds of playing your deck the way that you want to play it. So I'll wait till you've got it open there before I start explaining it here.
Oh, I went into the wrong place. Of course. Hey, hold on. There we go. We'll do that, and we'll go copy. Come over here, and we'll paste it in and hit enter. And there we go. All right, so here we are, Hypergeometric Calculator.
Yeah, so how you would use this in drawing from a deck of cards is obviously your population size is how many cards you have in that deck. The whole list of possibilities that you could draw from. So that's usually 60, unless you're limited, that's 40. Number of successes is a success is the card that you're looking for. So say you're looking for a blood, you want to see the chances of you having 2 blood by turn 2. So say you've got 10 blood in your deck plus 4 Shards of Fate, so that's 14 altogether.
Right.
Sample size is going to be how many cards you've drawn. That's how many instances you've picked from that population.
Say our opening hand, 7.
Yeah, well, opening hand, and then maybe for turn 2, it's going to be 8. Because you're looking at the, say, Inquisition. or yeah,
Or zombie
number
plague
of
or
successes. Yeah, zombie plague, sure, because we're actually talking about this deck. And number of successes in sample is how many of those you need. So we're looking at 2 for zombie plague.
Right.
So then you hit calculate, and the bottom number there, cumulative probability, is the chance that you're going to draw 2 or more of those shards. So you've got a 60% chance, 60.115, yeah.
Yeah,
And
that's not too bad.
That's decent. If you think about the chances of you also drawing one of those 4 zombie plagues and combine that with that 60% chance, that's decent, because you obviously don't want to waste having 2 threshold if you're not going to have a card with 2 threshold, right?
Right.
But yeah, if you play around with that tool, it really does help you tune your decks, and that's really important in having something that's consistent and playable every time.
Right. So we're going to do the count right now. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25. So 25 Sapphire Shards. That's, of course, I'm counting up all the icons, because that's what I like to do. That's what I was taught. And then we've got 2, 3, 4, another 8 plus 4 is 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28. So you can see that we're a little bit heavier in blood here. And that's fine, because we really need to cast this Extinction. And so we'll go up, like, we could, I think what I did was I went up 2 on blood. Like that? Is that right? No, it's 61 cards.
Extinction is obviously the must, but it's nice to be able to play Zombie Plague and Corpse Fly when you get them as well.
Right, exactly. And depending on how much you really need to play those cards, you know, that's how you're going to affect, that's going to affect this. Now, on the flip side of that, when you're playing this deck, you only need 2 blood threshold to use everything in the deck. So every time after, as soon as you've met that and you have your Sapphire Shards, every choice you make, whether you're going to go Sapphire or blood, needs to be Sapphire. And the reason why is because you want to maximize peak. Peak is like, I've peaked for like 14 before, which is ridiculous. I basically looked through every card that was left in my deck because I didn't have that many. It was a very long game. It was control versus control. But yeah, that's the biggest thing. So when you're using your Infusion device and when you're using your Shards of Fate, if you already have 2 blood up, that's what you're going to want to do. That actually was another case for me to remove Urnaz from the deck, because Urnaz has that 3 blood, and so that was like one more thing I had to like plan for when I was looking at the deck. So but I think that we're pretty good on this deck. I basically made one change to it. I made like one quick change. I got to look at it over here, and I feel like going down to 24 is not going to be too detrimental, and picking up that extra Dingler shouldn't be too bad for me, and I should still be able to do what I need to do and get the shards properly and have more spells to play. So in closing, we'll just talk about you know, we had GPRIME on. He's going to be running the tournament tomorrow, and we really appreciate that. He's got some great content he's putting out. He can't get it always, you know, most regular. I appreciate, you know, I'm sure he would appreciate it if you guys went over and subscribe to his Twitch if you haven't done that already. You can. He's going to go ahead and post that in chat, I'm sure. We talked about some of the patch notes. Not a lot going on, mostly aesthetics. Talked about that zombie plague and you know, some of the things they're doing. They're really getting ready for beta. You can definitely see that. And then we talked about my controversial Reddit post and basically being a good sportsman and not exploiting the game and discouraging others that do. And you know, it doesn't mean we have to rage about it or get up all, you know, it's someone's business, but you know, I feel like it's our responsibility to take steps to change our culture. Otherwise, no one's going to do it. So, GPRIME, do you have any sign-off line or anything? Or
well, yeah, I just want to say that even if you're not able to actually participate in the championship tomorrow, the HTP Challenge Series, do hang around Twitch and see if you can find a stream, because I'm sure there's going to be a lot of the 98, almost 100 people. Check them out, and there's going to be, given the fact that we're showing playing every match at the same time, there's going to be something to watch, guaranteed. Somebody's going to be on. Probably your favorite streamer is going to be playing in that event, so definitely check it out. And as well as that, the following week, the HexTech guys are putting on a tournament that I'm actually taking part in called the Triforce Championship, and I'm posting a link in the chat real quick.
And that's going to be awesome. Yeah, that tournament. Yeah, quick plug on that. That's going to be really good because they're going to have the dual view going where you're going to be able to see both players' hands, and that's going to be really good. So make sure to check that out. And if you can't catch it the first time, I'm sure they'll syndicate it and put it out on YouTube or somewhere. And so yeah, definitely make sure you're supporting those guys as well. So that's pretty much it for us. So this is Aaron Squire signing off, saying God bless you and your families, and try not to rage too much out there.
Good night.